Hi, my name's Carrie and welcome back to my channel. First, I'd like to apologize for any traffic noises you may hear during this video. I'm taking full advantage of the low humidity we're having in our area right now, and I have some windows open, so I do apologize for that. In this video, I'm going to show you some of the decks that I have modified over the past couple years, and there aren't many of them. And if you did happen to watch my previous video of how the tarot community has impacted my practice, I didn't mention it there, but this is one of the ways that I've been influenced by the online community, is modifying decks. I never would have thought to cut borders off, edge decks, rename decks, or any of the sort without watching some of the fantastic creators here on YouTube. So let's get started. The first deck I'm going to show you is my mass market light Seers. I didn't do much to this deck but edge it. And at the time, that was such a big leap for me, was to even think of taking a marker to the edge of the deck, because I didn't want to ruin the images on this deck at all. But I tried to keep in mind that it was mass market, and if I damaged it too much, I could always go ahead and get a replacement for it. And it just so happened that I do have a replacement for this deck, only because this was the first batch of decks Hay House had sent out that had that flaw in the way that they were cut. And mine is a little wonky to begin with, so that made it a little bit easier to re-edge this when I got the replacement deck in from Hay House. But anyway, I just did one color, and I had to go around the edges several times with it, and I don't know what color I used. So I'm going to say the one thing I don't like about edging decks with markers is it really tears up the marker. And I'm a paper crafter, so I have a lot of supplies, and I use my supplies, markers, ink pads, and so on, for other things. And I don't want the tips of the marker to be destroyed in any way. So I'm not thrilled with what happens to the marker tips when you use it, but I am happy with how this one came out. One of the next modifications I made was to the Faery Forest Oracle by Lucy Cavendish. And this is kind of a twofold modification, because not only did I edge it in a brown, but I also cut all the borders off for the first time. And I adore the way this deck turned out. You don't realize, or I didn't realize, how distracting the borders were until they were removed. And the images are just in your face now, and you can, I feel, I can see more of the detail of the cards with the borders cut off. Was the edging necessary? Not necessarily, but I like the way the brown turned out. And I think for this edge, I used a couple of my ink pads instead. I think I used a Tim Holtz vintage photo ink pad, and then I used a I had another brown ink pad that I went and drug the edges of the cards through it, but I did make sure that I rubbed them multiple times along a piece of paper towel so they don't bleed onto my hands, especially if you're using the Tim Holtz products. I find that those bleed onto your hands a little bit. But nothing got around the edges, or onto the image, which I was thrilled about. And like I said, I just love how this deck came out. The third deck I modified was the Halloween Oracle by Stacey Demarco. And this was kind of the same exact thing that I had just done with the Fairy Forest Oracle. Was I trimmed it, I just used Sharpie, black Sharpie on this one, and you can see from shuffling it that it's already starting to chip off, but I just took the edges off. And I just love this deck so much more now. Like I said, I feel the same way with this one as I do the Fairy Forest Oracle, where the images are just right there in your face. There's no distracting border. I think it had like an orange ring and then the black border, and there's none of that. And this is just right there for you to really dive into the image and not be distracted by the outer edge. This deck was modified out of necessity. The other decks I modified just for the aesthetic of the deck, but this one I modified because it was gigantic. I couldn't even use this deck prior to cutting some of the edges off of it, because it was just so huge, and it was absolutely impossible to shuffle. There was no shuffling of it whatsoever, which I kind of found a little annoying. So I cut the top, which I tried to do more of I tried to be very cautious of the measurements. So there's some cards where the there's a little bit of color left along the top that I could probably go back in and cut off, but I'm going to be honest, I don't use this deck. I think the images on it are fantastic, but I don't connect well to it, even after modifying it. So and I forgot to mention with my other modifications, I rounded all my corners. And for my corner rounding, I used what I have on hand for my paper crafting, and that is the Crop-A-Dile corner chomper, I believe it's called. And there's two sizes. One is the 1/4 inch, and the other side of the chomper has the 1/2 inch cut. This is, I think, the 1/2 inch. The other decks had the 1/4 inch rounding on them, but I love it because it's a grip style like this, where you're not trying to push the corner rounder down with your thumb or set it on a table and press down. This one I just hold in my hand and I tuck the cards up in, and you can just squeeze it like that. And it's very easy to use. And I've had it for years and years and years. And I cut cardstock with it all the time because, like I said, it was originally used in my paper crafting. And it still cuts all my edges perfectly. But yes, I tried with this one, and even after modifying it, I don't really use it, but it's not one I'm going to get rid of either. So my last two decks I'm going to show you, I feel, are the biggest modifications I have done on any of the decks that I own. And the first one which if you already own this deck, you know what it is the Nicoletta Ceccoli Tarot. I saw people walk through this deck and talk about how it's impacted their practice, and it fell into that FOMO category for me of, oh my gosh, I have to have that deck, even though it was mass market. I just thought, this is one, I love it. I'm going to love it as much as they love it. Yeah, well, I didn't. So I thought, I've got to find different ways to bond with this deck. And I tried everything. I tried different spreads with it. It never spoke to me. I even made my own handmade journal for it, which comes from my paper crafting background. I made my own journal for it. I took pictures of every individual card and put them on the page, and I was going to study the deck. And it just fell flat. I did absolutely nothing with it. That journal's been torn apart and used for something else now, but I just couldn't. So I decided to chop all the borders off and the numbers and corresponding symbols of what the card was and use it as an oracle deck. So that's what I did. I laid all the cards out on the table and put little strips of paper across them and looked at the image of what I felt it was trying to tell me. And that was great. Then I watched Lisa Pepez's walkthrough and her talking about how she reacted to this deck. And I came back after watching that and stuck the tarot correspondence back on the bottom of the deck somewhere. Will I use it like that? No, but I wanted to have what the image originally was, just in case, which I probably never will, but just in case I did ever want to use it like that again. I will tell you that the only marker that I could find that worked on these cards was a Sharpie fine point, not an old style Sharpie fine point, because the other Sharpie that I had, which I cannot remember what it's called, it smeared right off. But the Sharpie fine point, I was able to write things on here and not have to worry about it. I do like this deck a lot more looking at it from an oracle standpoint, and I haven't used it much for that purpose yet, but I don't have a aversion, I guess, to it, which I had when it was sitting there wasting away in my bag as a tarot. So this was what I consider a pretty big mod for me, where I was taking a once tarot deck and turning it into an oracle, which my writing is not fantastic on here, but it does it serves the purpose, I guess. So that was a really big modification. And the final modification I'm going to show you, I just recently did in the past 2 weeks. And I apologize if you can see the coffee stains on this bag. I used this when we went on vacation to the beach, and I was sitting on the balcony and knocked my coffee over. Thank God the deck was, I took other decks in this, but thank God they were out of it. So these oracles, I I don't know why I bought the second one when I didn't connect to the first one. And anybody who has these oracles will recognize them from the backs of the cards. And it's the Work Your Light Oracle and the Starseed Oracle, both by Rebecca Campbell. And I believe the artwork is Danielle Noel, and I apologize if I have that wrong, and if I do, just leave me a comment below, because I've gotten rid of the boxes and such since I modified it. But I edged the deck when I wasn't connecting to it. This is the first one I got. And I edged it in a rose pink color. I have an ink pad by Stampin' Up. And I just drug it through that and edged my deck thinking, oh, that'll help me connect to it. And I tried using it for my own personal guidance. I tried using it as guidance in a group that I run, and nobody was connecting with it. I felt that the words were just too far, or the titles, I guess, were just too far in another direction from where my current practice is for me to really enjoy the deck. So it was Dani Mystic, her modification of her Work Your Light, that had me, wow, that's fantastic. Let's try it. I will try to leave a link description box below to her video of her Work Your Light Oracle that she modified. I believe she put another treatment over top of her cards. I did not do that. All I did was go through and I chopped off the bottom of the deck where the cards and the phrase was, and stamped what I felt the image of the card represented. Now, if you're going to try this, I used a couple different inks, and this cardstock is so smooth that the inks would not stay. They smeared when you were trying to stamp with it, and they smeared if you even thought of touching it. And I believe one of the brands I used was Memento ink, did not work for me. And my favorite ink that I use in my paper crafting is the My Favorite Things hybrid ink pad, and that smeared right away. So I suggest, if you are going to do this, that you do it either in an area like this, or there's this card that you do a trial run on and have paper towels handy so you can wipe it right off, because I was lucky that those two inks did wipe off. They left a little bit of residue behind, but that's fine by me. So the ink pad that I ended up using was Staz On, S-T-A-Z, and then On. And it's a solvent ink, and I even think you can stamp with on tiles with it. So I figured that it would stay permanently on here. So I had to be very careful with what I was putting on the card, because I knew there was no wiping it off once it was on there. But this is, I would say, my absolute favorite modification. I believe when Dani modified her deck, she didn't use all the cards, but I wanted to have use of the whole entire deck. So I found a word for every card. Some of these are exactly as she had hers, and then some of them are my own. But I absolutely love how this modification turned out. It makes me so excited to want to use this deck again. And I love how the ink bled just a little bit, and it was from me not cleaning the stamp off enough. So I have the little marks here and there, and some of the letters, even when I dipped it or stamped it on the ink multiple times, still came out faded. And I love the effect of that. I think it just goes perfectly with the images here. So since I did the Work Your Light and it turned out so fantastic, I went ahead and did the exact same thing to my Starseed. And it's the same thing. I love how each one of these cards turned out. I did have a bit of difficulty on some of the images coming up with names or what the feeling of the card was giving me, but I was bound and determined to use every single card. Like this one, Fear. I know the original, oh, it had something to do with prayer of some sort. I can't remember, but it was something to do with prayer, obviously, because look at how they are sitting or kneeling. But I was just looking and I thought, this says more fear to me. The coloring and the way they're bowed, and I just feel a desperation more with this card than just a praying. It's like we are praying out of fear. We are praying out of desperation instead of being open to whatever is coming to us. And that's why I chose that for that title. This one was an easy one, New Path, where it's all darker and one solid color down here, and then you've got a whole new world going on up there. Leap, this just screamed Fool card to me. The lightning bolt made me think of creation. Deep dive with our whale here. The one thing I will say, I don't know if it's showing up on camera or not. I won't know, I guess, until I edit. This says void. Even though it's hard to stamp on black, that's fine for me, because all I have to do is just tilt it a little bit and then you can see the word come across there. I love this one too, Walk Away. But yes, these two decks, which like I said, I've done just within the past couple weeks, have been my absolute favorite modifications. So guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if this is the kind of content that you like to see. I am going to try to upload a video at least once a week. I haven't decided exactly what day that's going to be yet, but that's what my plans are moving forward, is a once a week release, and we will go from there. So until next time, bye.